what is Zionism? And so for many years, I studied Zionism. Many people are familiar with the term, but aren't clear about its true meaning or historical context. Zionism actually originated in the 1800s and has evolved significantly over time. There are various forms of Zionism, including Judaic religious Zionism, secular Zionism, and Christian Zionism. The focus today, however, is on modern-day Zionism, and this seems to be the driving force in what is happening in our politics today. What is Zionism and this modern-day Zionism, and how is it affecting and impacting our global events? At the heart of Zionism is a belief that Jews have a God-given right to the land of Israel, but this has become a controversial topic, especially in light of the conflicts that are going on right now.
Welcome to Learning to Listen to Palestine, where stories come alive and hearts connect. Each week, your host, Lanny Lanchester, will dive into the untold histories, powerful narratives, and insightful interviews that bring us closer to understanding Palestine. Ready to be educated, empowered, and motivated? Let's get started.
Welcome, everybody, to Learning to Listen to Palestine. I'm so glad you guys are all here. Today, we are going to be looking deeper into quest in learning to listen to Palestine and what it took to change me from a Christian Zionist into somebody who has learned to listen to Palestinians and to love my neighbor as myself. So, the way this started, I just want to let you guys all know that I have written this book, Learning to Listen to Palestine, a personal quest. I encourage you to get this book to learn more about my travels and how I've learned about Palestine. In the back of the book, there is a lot of sources of the research that I have done as I have investigated the things that I have been learning about. So today, we're going to go a little bit into a different area of my learning and what has changed my thinking. The last time we did this one-on-one, I told you about how I went to Israel and to Palestine and to Jordan, and I talked to people, and I got to meet people one-on-one. And listening to their stories just changed my thinking. It opened me up and it gave me a lot of questions, a lot of things that I had to investigate and learn more about. But there was one incident, there's probably several, but there was one incident in particular we're going to talk about today that was just me and God. And this was just outside of Jerusalem. And up on the Mount of Olives, I had an encounter with God that changed my thinking. And it completely, as I was learning to listen to Palestinians, I was questioning the things that I thought I knew about Zionism. But at this point was when I knew that God was not a Zionist and that this thinking was completely wrong. So I'm going to tell you more about that as we get into today. So I'm going to share a presentation. There we go. So this is the Mount of Olives. This is just outside of the old city in Jerusalem. And it's quite tall, it's quite a hike. And I hiked up this thing to all of these churches. But there was one church in particular, I think it's right in here. There it is. So this is Paternoster. And Paternoster, when I got up to here, and I sat there and I rested and I prayed and I thought, I had an epiphany that completely changed my understanding of God's relationship with Israel. But we'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to tell you where I began as a Christian Zionist. When I was young, I grew up with Zionism in my home. Zionism was believed in my home and in my church to be a modern miracle. God rebirthed the nation of Israel, and this was an amazing thing. However, once I started traveling through Israel and Palestine and hearing the Palestinian stories and researching about the Nakba, something didn't seem right. Well, let me go back. I'm wandering because I'm trying to stay on this one. When I was a teenager and I was just getting involved in politics, I looked at all the political parties and I thought, I'm a Democrat because God must be a Democrat. He likes to take care of people and he wants to take care of people's needs. And so I thought God must be a Democrat, so I would be a Democrat. So I was for a few years. And after a few years of studying what the Democrats believed and watching the way the parties behaved, I thought, no, God's not a Democrat. So then I thought he must be a Republican. So I went through many years of being a Republican and studying the Republican politics and the politicians. And after a while, I realized, no, God's not a Republican. So after a while, I thought, God must be a Zionist, because I was raised with Zionism. So I figured that's it. I'm a Zionist. Well, this brings in an interesting thought, because we've always seen Zionism as theology about our faith, but here it definitely has a political bent, and it fit very nicely into my thinking here. And I said I was a Zionist because I believed God was a Zionist. God favored Israel. And as I said that one time, I heard God say to me, "Am I really a Zionist?" And I went, "What? I thought so." And so for years of watching Zionism, I started realizing that something was wrong, but I didn't know what. I really just didn't know what. So I'm a scientist, and with science, I always teach my students that coming up with the right answer isn't near as important as coming up with good questions. So my first question is, what is Zionism? And so for many years, I studied Zionism, what it is. Many people are familiar with the term, but aren't clear about its true meaning or historical context. Zionism actually originated in the 1800s and has evolved significantly over time. There are various forms of Zionism, including Judaic, religious Zionism, secular Zionism, and Christian Zionism. The focus today, however, is on modern-day Zionism, and this seems to be the driving force in what is happening in our politics today. Is what is Zionism and this modern-day Zionism, and how is it affecting and impacting our global events? At the heart of Zionism is a belief that Jews have a God-given right to the land of Israel, but this has become a controversial topic, especially in light of the conflicts that are going on right now. So here's some questions. What does modern Zionism look like? And if we look into it, we find out, first of all, 82% of American evangelical Christians are Zionist, but only 40% of American Jews are Zionist. Okay, so that's a surprising thing to see. What else does Zionism look like? Well, we need to come up with more questions. So I came up with a few, and you guys can come up with your own questions. And this is important because if you come up with questions, this helps you to watch the news differently, to ask questions as you watch the news, or to look into social media differently, to look for books, to look for other sources of information to answer your questions. Very important to ask questions. So what is it that evangelical Christians believe? This is something I can't answer this in just today. This is something you're going to have to research and come up with your own questions. Where do these beliefs come from? And why don't American Jews believe in Zionism as strongly as American Christians? And this is interesting, and we'll talk about this over the next few weeks as well. So here's a question. Again, what does modern Zionism look like? And I have a video for us to watch, and we'll talk about this in just a moment after we watch it. So for those of you who can't see it, I'll tell you what's about to happen. There is some American activists who are working with some Palestinian farmers. And the reason why they're working with the Palestinian farmers is that the Palestinian farmers are being attacked by Israeli settlers. When the Palestinians go to their land to take care of their trees, they are being attacked. And so you'll watch this. And this time the American activists are with them, hope with the idea that the Israeli settlers won't attack them with the Americans there present. So let's see what happens.
Israeli settlers were captured on video attacking Palestinian farmers in the West Bank. Foreign activists who were also attacked during the incident were accompanying the farmers as part of a campaign to protect Palestinians from such attacks. The settlers approached the group before hitting them with thick wooden sticks, said one of the activists, causing one of them to fall. 3 of the activists and 1 farmer were taken to hospital with injuries. The Israel Defense Forces condemned the attack and told CNN that soldiers were sent to the scene and fired warning shots, prompting the attackers to flee. A similar incident happened the day before, where Israeli settlers attacked a Palestinian family with sticks. The attacks happened within a day of the ICJ ruling Israel's presence in the West Bank as illegal.
Okay, so this was one thing that modern Zionism looks like. The family that is being attacked, they are not Hamas, they're not soldiers, they're not fighters. They're farmers. They're farmers who are going to their land to take care of the land, to provide a crop, to take care of their families. And the day before, a family was attacked near their own home by these Israeli settlers. Additionally, you can see that we have some American activists who are with them. Why are the American activists with them? Peacemakers. They're trying to keep the peace. They weren't there as agitators. They were there because they believed that their presence would keep these settlers from attacking these people. And if you can see it, not everybody has seen this. If you're just hearing this, what they're being hit by are, they say sticks, but they are quite wide. They're at least 3-inch sticks, so they're more like clubs, 3 to 4-inch sticks, around in diameter. And I saw some of the injuries on the Americans, some pictures, and they're quite extensive. The bruising and the swelling on the face and the arms, it's quite horrible. So this is one picture of modern Zionism. This next clip that I'm going to show you of modern Zionism comes from just outside of Bethlehem. This time, Palestinians here that are affected. These are Palestinian Israeli Christians. So these are Christian Palestinians who have their Israeli citizenship. So they are on Israel land. They have had this land long time back, and they have their farms and their homes there, and they are being forced off their land with the aid of the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF. So let's watch this video.
Put everything out for us. They removed us from the land without any paper, without any right. And here they are, military protecting those settlers. لا إسرائيلي citizen كمان إحنا إسرائيلي citizen.
So you can see she's holding her Israeli passport. She's showing him that she is an Israeli citizen. They have no paperwork saying that they have rights to this land. They are just taking the land and pushing them off. And the Israeli Defense Force, the soldiers, are there not to protect the people who own the land, but to protect the settlers who are stealing the land with the help of the government.
Say hi to the camera.
Again, so that clip came from just outside of Jerusalem, or it's outside of Bethlehem, but near Jerusalem. So between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. Again, that's modern Zionism. That's what that looks like. So let me share this with you.
Masked Israeli settlers were captured on video attacking Palestinian farmers in the West Bank.
All right, so again, keeping with the same theme, what does modern Zionism look like? Well, let's go back to 1946. 1946, here's a picture of Palestine, and if you can't see it, I'll describe what I'm seeing here. It is a picture of Palestine all in green, except for a few sprinkling, mostly along the coast and a little bit up of the northern border near Syria, with some white. And these are Israeli settlements. These are lands that, not Israeli settlements. These are Jewish settlements. These are lands that Jews had bought between like 1880 to 1946. And the Jews had settled in these places and built kibbutzes and villages and towns. The rest of all of this green is settled with Palestinians who've owned this land for hundreds and sometimes thousands of years. Their families have lived there all this time. The next picture is the UN plan from 1947, and you can see in it that there is more white, and it is the plan that they would give control of this area in white to the Jews to form a government and have a Jewish country. The green is Palestine. And so Israel gets a little bit more than half of the land in this 1947 plan, even though the Palestinians did own all of this other land. But the idea was that the Jews would be the governors of this area, that they would form their own government, and the Palestinians would form a government over the Palestinian areas. But what happened was, starting in 1947 and 1948, the Jews began to ethnically cleanse the area in white, and then they went beyond that as well. And so here we have 1949 to 1947. We can see a lot more land than was in the 1947 plan has been ethnically cleansed and created a Jewish state. And so they took quite a bit more. And the way they did this is it was called ethnic cleansing. They would surround a village in like a C shape with soldiers, and they would dynamite a few houses with people in them. And then they would pull all of the men out of a certain age, and they would kill some of them in front of the other villagers so that they would be terrorized. And then they would terrorize them and they would force them out of the villages. So 530 villages were ethnically cleansed in this way. So, but there wasn't just ethnic cleansing. There were also many murders. There were some entire villages were killed. And so there were massacres. There were at least a dozen massacres like that. And there were 750,000 people were forced off their land, and they became refugees. So that is another picture of what modern Zionism looks like. Then we get on here to in 2012. So after the Oslo Accords, the land has changed again, and you can see there is now just a sprinkling of green left. So we started out with just a sprinkling of white, and now we have just a sprinkling of green left in the West Bank. And even though all of this in 1949 to 1967 should be considered Palestine and is considered Palestine, this area the white that is in this area are illegal Israeli settlements. So this is Zionism. The Israeli settlements come in and they take the land away from the Palestinians by force. And that was some of those videos we just saw. To learn more about this, you have to really investigate and look for it. And once you look for it, you will see this quite plainly. There are many films about this. They're available on Netflix and on Amazon Prime. They're available on YouTube, where it shows people being forced off their land. And these are not Hamas. These are not Hezbollah. This is not Iran. These are farmers. These are families. So that's what it looks like. Here's another thing that it looks like. Zionism, as I investigate it further, there's a lot in Zionism. So Zionism is a lot like this barrel on 3 legs. There's a lot in here, but it all stands on 3 pillars. And if any one of these pillars is gone, it doesn't stand and everything falls out. So what are these 3 supports that modern Zionism stands on. The first one is racism or nationalism. This is the idea that the Jews are more important, more valued than the Palestinians or than other races. This can be seen in many places, and it becomes quite clear. The Palestinians have been dehumanized. What is happening to them right now in Gaza and the West Bank could not happen to them if they have not been dehumanized. So that is one of the supports. Colonialism. We saw colonialism in that picture with the green and the white. That is a picture of colonialism where you're taking land from one group and another group is taking it over and forcing people off the land. They're doing this by ethnically cleansing, they're doing this by massacres, and they're doing this by creating refugees. And the third one is theology. And this is where we have our biggest questions, is theology. Is God a Zionist? Because if God is a Zionist, he also supports this colonialism, and he supports this racism or nationalism. So we have to think about this. What does this really mean? Or am I looking at this wrong somehow?
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode show by clicking the subscribe button now. Don't forget to check out Lanny's book, Learning to Listen to Palestine. Now back to the show.
So looking deeper into theology, we have to look into the Bible. What is the main support, theological support of Zionism? And it comes back to these three verses. Genesis 12, 1 through 3. The Lord has said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you." So these are the verses that I grew up with. I grew up believing that if I blessed Israel, I would be blessed, and if I cursed Israel, I would be cursed. Now, looking at it as an adult, I look at this and kind of go, well, that's kind of like making Israel into an idol, that if I rub its tummy, I'm going to get, and if I knock it over, I'm going to get cursed. Is this right? So I go over this in detail in my book, Learning to Listen to Palestine. So I encourage you to look deeper in this. I cover a lot of details on this all together here and give you a lot more resources to look into that. But I want to look at one phrase right here, and you will be a blessing, and you will be a blessing. In my search, in trying to understand the theology of Zionism, I came across a problem with the translation right here, and you will be a blessing. This is actually an imperative. It's a command, but it's not written as a command here, and you will be a blessing. So if it's said as a command, it would be a blessing. So I have been studying the works of Yohanan Catanaccio. He is a theologian from Nazareth. He's a Christian Palestinian, and he is an amazing theologian. But we should test his theology, right? So let's do that. This is the way he says that we should translate it. Leave your land, your kindred, and house of your father to the land that I will show you. Then I will make you into a great nation, bless you, and make your name great. Here's the difference. Be a blessing, so that I can bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you, and all the families of the earth can be blessed in you. So if we look at that way, be a blessing so that I can bless those who bless you, it's a conditional promise. It's a conditional promise that if Israel is a blessing, then all they bless those who bless them and curse those who curse them. And all families of the earth can be blessed through Israel. Well, I can take this right now and judge this one right here. Are all families on the earth being blessed right now through Israel? We just saw 2 families that are not being blessed by Israel, and we know there are a lot more. There are 2.2 million people in Gaza who are without food, without water. Their homes have been destroyed. There are diseases breaking out, polio. We now have a polio outbreak. Now we know if polio moves from there, all the families in the world are cursed. So there's something wrong here already. But let's keep on going. Let's look at this some more to see if this translation is correct. So how do we test it? Let's test it with other scriptures and see if it's a conditional promise or if it's an unconditional promise. And we want to have at least 2 witnesses, because Jesus said, at the mouth of 2 witnesses or at the mouth of 3 witnesses shall a matter be established. Actually, Moses also said this, Jesus said this, and Paul said this. So we want at least 2 witnesses or 3. So let's start with Moses. In Deuteronomy 4:1, he writes, "Hear now, O Israel, the decrees and the laws I'm about to teach you. Follow them so that you may live, and you may go in and take possession of the land that the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you." So here we see a conditional promise. Now, Deuteronomy 16:20. Again, this is Moses. "Follow justice, and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land that the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you." Again, it's a conditional promise. The land will be theirs if they follow justice and justice alone. We can also look through the history of the Old Testament. There are times when Israel is being a blessing to nations and God is blessing them. And he is seeing those who bless them at that time and cursing those who curse them at that time. But sometimes there are bad kings and bad things going on in Israel, and they lose the land. They go into exile. So what is happening there? So that sounds like a conditional promise there, because otherwise God was lying. But it was a conditional promise. Now let's look at Jesus. Jesus proclaimed that the meek shall inherit the earth. The meek, not the strong, not the aggressive, harsh, tyrannical, will enter the land and inherit it. And finally, I'm going to get to that portion where God changed my thinking. And it was at this church called Paternoster. Now, this church commemorates the place where Jesus taught his disciples how to pray. The Lord's Prayer. Look at these walls here. If you can see this, there are 172 plaques around this church with the Lord's Prayer on them. It's 172 times it's written, but each time in a different language. So I walked through this church. After climbing this hill, I walked through this church and I sat down. It was hot and I was tired. And it was December, but it was quite warm, especially after climbing that mountain. And I found the plaque that had the Lord's Prayer in English. And maybe it was climbing the mountain, but it had in my head how opposite this was from the Tower of Babel. So here is my journal, if you guys can see this. This is my journal from that day after climbing the Mount of Olives. And this is what I wrote. Here, the church commemorates Jesus' teaching and how to pray, and how this teaching has gone into all the world. Here, 170 languages are commemorated. In a sense, the damage of the Tower of Babel is undone here in a prayer. We all have the same Father. We all have the same hope, heaven. We are all of the same kingdom. We all have the same law. We all rely on God for our sustenance, for our needs. We are all sinners. We all need the guidance of our Father, the Good Shepherd, to navigate through this fallen world. But God's kingdom, not all of these others, are eternal. So now, with this prayer, we can look again at Zionism and those 3 pillars of Zionism. So again, if you guys don't know what the Tower of Babel is, in the Bible, there is this point, I think it's in Genesis 10, when all of the people gathered together and they say, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches into the heavens so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the whole face of the earth." But God disapproves of this, and he confuses their language, and suddenly this is where all of the languages were born, where people couldn't understand each other and people went their different ways who spoke different languages. And it's interesting because looking at this prayer and thinking about this, we are all united in one prayer, even though there's all of these languages. And this is something that Jesus did. And listen to the words and how it unites us. One Father, hallowed be thy name. So in the Tower of Babel, people were trying to make a name for themselves. In our world, we're trying to make a name for ourselves. The Americans, we think we're better than everybody. And the Israelis, they think they're better than everybody. Right now we have the Olympics going on and everybody's trying to make a name for themselves to win those gold medals for their country. But here we elevate God's name, this prayer. It's God's name that's elevated and is important. Thy kingdom come. Here, all nationalism is gone. As we pray this together amongst all of our languages around the world, we can all pray this together and we have one kingdom and one Father and one King. Nationalism's gone. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Oh, and I love this one. Because think about it. In heaven, we are not divided by races. We are not divided by skin colors. We're not divided about you guys eat this and I eat that by these culture differences. We are one people. We aren't divided by these silly things anymore. Give us this day our daily bread. So as people are fighting over land and stuff and things like that, we have one provider, and that's God. So we don't have to fight over things anymore. With this prayer, we can trust in God to provide us with what we need for this day. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. You know, we're all sinners. But here's the peace plan. That I forgive you and you forgive me. In order to do that, we have to listen to each other. Because listening is the first step in loving. And so we need to learn to listen to each other so that we can hear each other's needs and hear each other's requests and to forgive each other. And this is a real clincher for me. And lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. We do have an enemy, and it's not each other. Our enemy is Satan. So we should all be on the same side. And so we have to figure out how to be on the same side. Now, Jesus didn't teach us to pray this prayer in heaven. He taught us to pray this prayer right now. And if he taught us to pray this prayer right now, that means he's not lying to us. It's possible right now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taught us to pray this right now. He would have taught us to pray something useful. This is useful. This is the peace plan. And this completely defeats Zionism. As I read this, sitting there on that bench at Paternoster Church, I realized that there is no nationalism. This defeats all nationalism. So this is something to think about. And I know that we have so much more to investigate after this to understand Palestine. And there's so many topics but this is a great place to start. There's more to understand about Zionism and what's going on in the world and what's going on between Israel and Palestine. There's so many more things to understand. But this is the groundwork. This is where we start. So if one thing I'd encourage you guys to do is pray this prayer every day and think about these parts as you're praying it every day. I've been praying it every day this year, and it has changed my heart. It has changed my view of the world, and it's given me more trust in God. And if we trust in God, we're not so worried we're not afraid. And we are more willing to listen and to love our neighbors. So I encourage you guys to get the book, Learning to Listen to Palestine, and to learn to listen to your neighbors. And the other book that I encourage you guys to check out is this book by Johanna Catanaccio. It's called The Land of Christ, A Palestinian's Cry. Amazing theology in this book, and it's beautifully done, and it will really open your eyes.
Thank you for tuning in to this enriching episode of Learning to Listen to Palestine. I hope today's stories and insights touched your heart and opened your mind. If you found value in our conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with friends and family. Your support helps us reach more listeners and foster a global community committed to understanding and peace. Don't forget to explore our book, Learning to Listen to Palestine, for a deeper dive into these poignant narratives. And if you're inspired to take action, join a local group or start one at your library to engage with Palestinian stories firsthand. See our show notes for inspiration. We'll be back next week with more profound stories and thoughtful discussions. Until then, remember to listen, learn, and build bridges. Keep the conversation going and stay connected. Thank you for being part of this journey.